Hey there, my fellow designers and creatives. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another video in my mega product design course for beginners. In this video, we're going to learn how to validate your problem statement and solution before going ahead and designing screens. It's very important that you do this because designing something that makes no sense is probably the last thing that you ever want to do. Now, before I get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video if you haven't done already. Okay, so with that being said, let's get started. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the most common mistakes that I see in case studies that people put out on the internet. And pretty much 90% of these, or maybe even 95% of the case studies that I see online have a lot of these mistakes, right? It can be one of these mistakes or it can be many of these mistakes. The first one is solving a problem that does not need to be solved. I've seen this a lot of times where people just think that it's a problem and they don't really understand the fact that the way something works is completely fine and it does not have to be solved or it does not have to be touched. Right? That's the first problem. The second one is being very vague about your target users and not defining what the user stories for your users are. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but being very vague about your target users is something that pretty much 99% of the case studies have. It's very vague. It's such at an umbrella level, and the person reading does not really understand who exactly is this person, right? So that's that. Then third one is designing a solution for different users. Now, what this basically means is that I've seen so many case studies where the target users are defined, but then the solution that they sort of end up designing don't even make sense for the particular target users, right? It's a solution, which is fine, right? But then when I look at the target users, I'm like, you're not actually solving it for this target user, right? This solution means something else. This solution is sort of solving the problem for some other type of users and not the users that you have defined, right? I've seen this disconnect a lot of times. And finally, the last one is solving a solution for different problems, right? And I think I want to say different problems, and I think I'm going to add another one, which is not solving problems that have been mentioned in the case study. And I've seen this so many times where they list a list of problems. They did some research, they got some insights, and then they listed that these are the problems. But then when I look at the solution, I'm like, you didn't even cover half of these problems that you spoke about, right? So these are the most common mistakes that you make. And the reason that these mistakes happen is because the problem, the user, and the solution is not clearly defined, is not validated by someone who is better than you, somewhat like a senior designer, and you don't see what are the gaps that are there in your entire problem statement altogether, right? So these are the reason why people end up making these mistakes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at a problem statement that somebody sent to me. It's basically their solution, their definition of who the users are and all of that. And I ended up giving this person feedback 4 times, right? And as you can see, there's a version 1, version 2, and version 3. And every time I gave feedback, he went and iterated and fixed a lot of things. And I'm going to show you the progress of what were the questions that I raised and how version 3 makes a lot more sense than version 1. Okay, so let's get started. Now, a super quick note. Before you go ahead and start working on a problem statement and designing screens, try to reach out to a couple of people and get their feedback on it. A lot of people are going to give different types of feedback, and it's up to you to decide whose feedback you want to go ahead and follow and whose do you think makes sense according to you, right? There are a lot of people online on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, ADP list, or wherever you find people, maybe even your seniors or whoever they are, right? Speak to a few people, get everything validated, and then start designing screens. Okay, so the problem statement that he picked was to design, and this was one of my problem statements, which I've put on my Instagram account. So if you haven't checked out my Instagram account, highly recommend you follow me over there. So design an app for travelers to experience guided tours at their own convenience, right? So this is like obviously at a vague level that I have set up, and now it's up to you, basically the person designing, to go ahead and make things a lot more clear and concrete, right? So it's an app for whom it's for travelers to do what? To experience guided tours at their own convenience. Okay, and there were a couple of things that I had mentioned, and he's just taken a screenshot of that. So aspects to think about: try to find problems with the way walking tours currently function, right? If you find out a lot of problems with the current way they function, you'll be able to come up with sensible solutions. And the other thing is, how can you use technologies like AR, which is obviously augmented reality, for making the entire guided tour experience much more engaging, right? So here it's about engaging, and here it's about trying to solve problems with the current way of walking tours. So the first thing that I would probably do is to identify the current problems and the current behaviors of people. All right, that's the first thing that I would do. Let's move forward. Now he's gone ahead and created this a bucket system, which is a framework that I teach in this video on how to solve design statements. Super important, super amazing video. Highly recommend you check it out. Okay, so the first bucket is to identify the type of product. And he has chosen a mobile app, which obviously makes sense because the problem statement here itself says design an app. So that's fine. And he has chosen preferably iOS. Now, this is something that you can take a call on. And I think my assumption as to why he's chosen iOS is mainly because of the fact that Android phones cannot handle the power of AR sometimes. So whatever it is, it's fine. Just keeping it as mobile app and assuming that this technology can be adopted on every device is fine, right? Then next, coming to the core problem. And this is something that he has copied from my problem statement and he's just written it down. And I'm going to read that. So when people travel to other countries or cities, they book guided tours, making exploring easy. Although they get the job done, many find it restrictive due to the time restrictions. So I think this is, I'm just going to bold this. So time restrictions and language barriers, right? So we are getting some high level problem statements over here. You know, we're going to go into the depths a little bit later, but these are quite high level. Time restrictions, all right, and language barrier. They are forced to follow the tour guide. So forced to follow. That's also the keyword, and cannot deviate from the pre-decided path. Yes, perfect. And tourist guides often talk fast and it might be difficult to understand their accent, right? So this is the language problem that they have, right? So this is fine. This is the core problem. Obviously, we have to get into a lot more details. Okay, now moving on to bucket 3, which is core users, all right? Who are you solving for? And again, this is supposed to be at a very top level. When we create user stories, we go into a little bit more detailed stuff. So we'll look at that later. So core users, solo travelers. Okay, so he's trying to target solo travelers, which is absolutely fine. Who are willing to explore by themselves, all right? So they're willing to explore by themselves at their own pace and will, okay? Which means they don't take guided tours. And then we also have solo travelers who prefer to take a guided tour, right? So these people want to take guided tours as they're not confident enough to explore the place by themselves. Okay. So basically he's just targeting two types of people: solo travelers who don't want guided tours and solo travelers who want guided tours. Okay. Now that's fine. We've got some understanding. Now, coming to the constraints and assumptions and the metrics, sometimes it might be very hard to come up with this right in the beginning unless you understand how the solution is and how the app works. It's hard to come up with it. But for now, he's mentioned cellular network might not be available at every time, right? So now here, if this is a constraint, does this mean that you can use the app only with an online connection, only when you have, Wi-Fi or you have cellular network, right? Is that how the app works? Can you not use the app in an offline mode, right? So according to me, I feel that this app should be used when you have internet connection and even when you don't have internet connection. The app should work, or else this app is not really going to work and it's not going to scale, right? So you need to be able to provide features that work with online connection and without online connection. So for me, first of all, I would say that this should not be a constraint at all, because the app should work with or without an online internet connection. Then you have metrics. Now, the thing is, it's very hard to judge what the metrics are over here because we don't even know how the app works. Now, once we know that, we'll know what the metrics are, so we can ignore this for now. Okay, so now we're getting to a little bit further stuff and we're trying to understand more about the people and the users. Okay, now here is where we end up seeing a lot of mistakes, and I'm going to take you through them. So the first user persona, Mr. Rahul, is an employee in a well-known MNC. Fine. He is unmarried and in his late 30s. Now, it's fine to build up this story, but actually it's a lot irrelevant because the point here is that this person is a traveler, right? Whether he's married, what's his age, where he works is irrelevant, right? But it's okay. There's a story that's being built up. He travels solo to a new destination twice a year. Okay, so traveling solo, that's who we are sort of targeting. To a new destination twice a year and likes to explore these places all by himself. It's safe to say that he has an adventurous mindset. Cool, right? And likes to explore these places all by himself, right? This is who Mr. Rahul is, right? That's fair. Maybe I'm actually going to go ahead and quickly change the colors of these as well so that it's sort of easy to understand. Maybe change that to like a blue color. Right? So copy this, copy the color code because I'm probably going to use it multiple times. Yep. Cool. Let's continue. Now, user story. Now, before I go on to reading this, let's understand what a user story actually is. Now, here is where we understand what a user story is. You get into the details about who the user is and form a user story around them that makes it easy for anyone reading the problem statement to empathize with the user and imagine how it feels for them. Okay. Now, if this sounds too bookish, that's totally fine. There are only 3 things that you need to consider when creating a user story. Who they are, what do they want to do, okay? And I want to make this a lot more clear. This is not the current behavior. Maybe this should not be the current behavior. This is basically something that they want to do, but they are unable to do, right? Let's put it that way. And the last one is, why do they want to do it? If you were able to answer these 3 questions, then you have a valid user story. Now, let me give you an example of what a user story looks like and, sounds like. And to give some more context, this is a user story for the salespeople who work in car showrooms who have to sell cars to the people who walk into the showroom, right? That's the context, right? So we have Mr. Raj, who wants to quickly be able to find a list of recommended cars. This is what he wants to do. And why does he want to do it? So that he can offer a good selection of choices, right? So it's important to mention who this person is, what they want to do, and why they want to do it. Then he wants to make a note of the customer's preferences. That's what he wants to do, so that he can show the features, benefits, videos, etc. and explain better to the customer, right? This is the why. Then Mr. Raj wants to find a way to help customer make an informed decision, right? He wants to help the customer make an informed decision. This is what he wants to do, right? So that he can close a sale, right? This is why he wants to do. So if you are able to create a very simple, straightforward user story, then you have a very good starting point, right? So now let me go back to his user story and let's read that. So just to recap, Mr. Rahul likes to travel solo and he wants to explore these places all by himself, which is fine. Now let's read his user story. Mr. Rahul wants to explore the places by himself, okay? But he feels he misses out on a lot of lesser known information or facts, all right, which are usually provided by a physical tour guide and not elsewhere. Okay, so the main problem here is that he feels that he misses out on a lot of lesser known facts. Okay, for example, a small bakery which makes the most affordable cakes in town. Okay, now the obvious argument that I would give is, if he feels he is missing out, why doesn't he just take a physical tour guide, right? If he feels he's missing out, why doesn't he just take one, right? Who can help him, right? But he also mentions that he never takes a tour guide as he does not want to be restricted by the predefined route and time constraints. Now, this is valid, but honestly, this is not a user story, right? Because this is basically the current behavior of Mr. Rahul. This is basically the problems Mr. Rahul faces, right? So before creating this user story, there needs to be another section where it just mentions the list of problems that people have. Okay. And ideally, what I would do is I would go ahead and call this current behaviors instead of a user story. Because here, I don't know what Mr. Rahul wants to do and why he wants to do it. Okay. So that's something that's very important to remember. And the second one is make the trip very spontaneous. This is quite vague in nature, to be honest. So I really don't know what this means. So I'm just going to skip this. Right? So this is Mr. Rahul, right? So he never takes a tour guide. I'm going to highlight this as well so that we can quickly see it. Highlight, right? I'm going to quickly change the color. All right. I'm going to copy this and then he feels he's missing out. All right. That's cool. Okay. That is perfect. Now, he has another user persona and let's read that. Now, Mr. Akash is in his mid-20s. And he's recently developed a knack of traveling and exploring new places. Fine. He mostly travels solo. So this is again the important part. And he prefers guided tours, right? That's also a behavior of exploring all by himself. over exploring all by himself, right? So he prefers guided tours. He likes to do extensive research and tries to pre-plan and all of that stuff, which is fine, right? Because the most important things are he mostly likes to do solo travel and he prefers guided tours, right? Those are like the most common things. Now, coming back again to the user story. Mr. Akash wants to take guided tours every time he feels worried if any guided tour is not available at that moment for that place. Okay? Learn about a history of a monument or listen to the old age tales of a place from the tour guide, but sometimes he's unable to cope up with the guide's accent or speed. Now I'm going to cover the second one first. Here again, this is a current behavior, right? He is unable to cope up with the guide's accent or speed, right? This has been structured in a way which is a problem, not a user story, right? So this again, which I would say is incorrect way of creating a user story. Now, coming over here to this one, taking guided tours every time he travels and feels worried if any guided tour is not available at that moment for that place. Now, this thing is very interesting, and I'm going to explain why this doesn't make sense with a different example. Now, here I have a simple problem statement. Mr. X is a gamer, but is unable to find the best places to buy gaming equipment, right? Now, if this is a problem, right, the ideal solution is to come up with a platform where you can buy the most trusted and affordable brands of gaming equipment. All right. Now, the thing here is that the job of somebody to do this is with an entrepreneur, and it is not a product designer, right? Coming up with a new platform, this is like starting your own company, right? You need suppliers, you need marketers, you need a website, you need an app, all of this, right? This is the job of an entrepreneur, not a designer, because this is not a design problem, right? So similarly, if Mr. Akash wants to take guided tours and feels worried if a guided tour is not available, there's nothing you can do about it. Right? And also, if you read this from an English or a grammatical standpoint, it does not make sense. Mr. Akash wants to take guided tours every time he travels and feels worried if guided tour is not available at that moment, right? So it's a statement, right? It's not mentioning what he wants to do and why he wants to do it. It's just mentioning that he wants to go and get guided tours and sometimes he's worried that a guided tour is not available. This is a problem statement. This is not a user story, right? So again, this statement has no validity. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail over here. So, in this case, if Mr. Rahul feels like he misses out on a lot of lesser known important facts, okay, and he does not want to take a tour guide, what are the other things that he can do, right? Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because if I come back over here, the first point that I mentioned over here was try to identify problems with the way walking tours currently function. This is the most important thing that you have to do when solving this. And this is something that is lacking in this problem statement that he has written, right? Now, I would argue by saying, wouldn't I go and speak to locals of that place and ask them, hey, where do I get the best, the best food? Or where do I get the most affordable places to buy clothes, right? Wouldn't I go to locals and ask for this information, right? So this is where I'm trying to emphasize this first point that I mentioned here, which was solving a problem that does not need to be solved, right? If people can go to Google, right, and if people can go to the locals and ask them for stuff like this, they'll be able to they'll be able to help you out, right? So why are you trying to create an app for something that does not need to be solved, right? This is exactly where I'm talking about. Cool. So that's one. And now coming to the second one over here, right? Unable to cope up with the guide's accent or speed. It's again important to understand what is the current behavior when people face this problem. What do people do, right, when they're not able to understand the guide's accent or speed, right? Maybe you speak to another person who's walking with you. Maybe you ask the guide to repeat. Maybe you go stand very close to the guide so you can listen clearly. People already do stuff like that, right? So if they have ways of solving this, why do you need an app to solve this, right? Now, he has also written the solution over here, okay? Now, obviously this solution will not make a lot of sense because I went ahead and pointed out a lot of mistakes over here, but let's quickly read it, right? Because he's gone ahead and iterated the solution as well. So to create an app that caters to both adventurous and not so adventurous travelers, which is like fine, right? Now, here the point is, I don't know why we have to differentiate adventurous and not adventurous. Why can't we just say all travelers, right? And he's also not emphasized solo travelers, right? Nowhere over here has he spoken about solo travelers, right? So this is again where I said that solving a solution for different users, right? You spoke about solo travelers in this part, but then your solution is for adventurous and non-adventurous, right? Where did adventurous come into the picture is my question. Okay. So coming back to the solution over here. Yeah, this was the one, right? So the said app will have activities, which is a virtually guided tour. Now it's very clear as to what activities really means, and basically a virtually guided tour. Now he's used the wrong term virtually over here because virtually basically means experiencing something from a different place altogether, right? It's like being on a trip but staying at home, right? That is sort of what virtually means. So this is technically the wrong word to use. Anyway, the users can go through the app, search for a specific location and select whatever activity that they would like to do. Now here again, it's so unclear as to what this activity is. So after paying for the activity, it can be like a subscription based model as well, but I'm trying to keep it simple for the first one, right? So this whole thing, I'm very unclear. I don't understand anything. The users who are more enthusiastic. Now, where did enthusiasm come into the picture, right? Because when I'm looking at a solution, I want to understand if you're coming up with a solution, who are you solving for, right? Are you solving for Mr. Rahul or are you solving for Mr. Akash? And which of the problems are you tackling? Are you solving problem number 1 for Akash, problem 2 for Akash, or are you solving for Mr. 1 Rahul or Mr. 2 Rahul, right? I don't know. Okay. And so a lot of these things are totally disconnected. So anyway, the users who are more enthusiastic might find the free roam feature, all right? And I don't know what this free roam feature is, okay? As this will not have any directions or show any tale to tell. Now, isn't this like Google Maps, right? I don't know, right? I don't know how this is different from Google Maps. Only suggestions like restaurant activities nearby will pop up on the screen, and this mode lets the user take their own decisions and explore their own way. Now, this is exactly like Google Maps according to me, right? This is what I would do, right? If I go there, I would be like, where are the public restrooms? Where are the restaurants? Where are the most common or most popular sightseeing areas? I would use Google Maps. Why would I download your app? Okay. Now, time travel is another mode, all right, which I think would be quite captivating to the users. Let's say a tour guide is telling how the Eiffel Tower was built. All right, and how it looked in the early days. With Time Traveler, the users can select any year on the screen and they will be provided with the photo of the Eiffel Tower of that year, followed with some text containing this. Now, first of all, this is not going to be your main USP or main solution. This is going to be like a tiny feature, right? And because this, first of all, this thing is not scalable at all, right? You can't do this for every single thing. It might be possible for some things like the Eiffel Tower he's mentioned. But again, my problem here is I don't know why this feature even exists. It's a good to have feature, but is it solving a problem? And are you doing this for Mr. Rahul or are you doing this for Mr. Akash? I don't really know. Okay. Now, there are future possibilities. I'm going to ignore this because these are not sort of considered. So I can ignore that for now. So after I gave him all this feedback, he went ahead and came up with version 2. And let's look at version 2. Okay. So again, user persona and story 1. Mr. Rahul is an employee at a well-known MNC. Same thing, married, late 30s, travel solo, twice a year and all of that stuff. Okay. Now here, the user story. Mr. Rahul wants to find a way to learn about the unpopular yet great places in our society as he believes he can experience the actual culture and heritage of those places. Now, this is a properly constructed user story because it says Mr. Rahul wants to find a way to learn about the unpopular places, all right, so that he can experience the actual culture heritage of the city. So here is defining who it is, what this person wants to do, and why this person wants to do it, right? So this is the correct way of creating this user story. But the problem with this again, and my argument will be, can't you just ask the locals, right? Because Google is what makes things popular, right? Google is what you go ahead and look at because they're popular, right? But an unpopular place like a newly cafe that was opened, all right, or some sort of a mountain or some sort of, hiking trail, whatever that might be, right? Which is going to be known only by the locals, right? So isn't asking locals going to solve this? So here yet again, I'm still trying to understand what is this problem statement all about. Okay. Now he's also gone ahead and created a user story for Akash. Okay. Now again, he's added something over here. So Mr. Akash is in his mid-20s, recently developed the knack of traveling, all of this stuff. He likes to travel solo, prefers guided tours, all of that is fine. And now this is the addition. Even though he can understand and speak English, he feels more comfortable communicating in Hindi. Now the problem here is why is it important to have this information, right? Because Mr. Akash is a traveler. He's not the tour guide, right? So him being able to communicate or speak in Hindi doesn't matter here at all, right? As long as he can speak and understand English, which is fine, which means he can even understand Hindi because he's comfortable speaking. Why is this information relevant if he's not the tour guide? Because if you are the person who's traveling, you're just going to be listening. You're just going to be seeing. You're not going to be talking much, right? But anyway, let's continue. Now here there's a user story. Mr. Akash wants to take guided tours everywhere he travels because he's not confident enough to experience it. Now this is not a user story, right? This is who Mr. Akash is, right? And he's already mentioned that over here. Mr. Akash wants to travel new places and he travels solo and he prefers taking guided tours. This is already written. So this is not what Mr. Akash wants to do, right? So if I come back over here, right, and to the second point, this should not be their current behavior. The user story that you're mentioning should not be their current behavior. It is something that they want to do, right? And in this case, Mr. Akash already does take guided tours. That is his current behavior. What is it that he wants to do that he's unable to do, right? That is something that should be addressed. So this again is invalid. Next, Mr. Akash wants to have a tour guide who speaks in his native language, Hindi in this case, so he does not miss out on anything the guide says, right? Now, this is a very, very tiny problem statement, right? And I would say this is probably 1%. This is like an edge case, right? So here again, even though the user story was created correctly, this is completely invalid, okay? Now, coming to the solution, right? Now, he's made a couple of changes here. So to create an app that caters to all types of solo travelers, right? So this is good, right? This is very clear now. Users like Mr. Akash, who wants to have a guided tour, can browse to the app and select a virtually guided tour. So basically, he's calling the guided tour itself as activity, which I find quite weird. It should just be called tours, right? Guided tours, right? An activity is like a single item, like, I don't know, wine tasting, for example, right? And he's given an example over here, okay? So let's see. Let's say someone visited Kolkata, right? And for people who are outside India, Kolkata is one of the cities in India. And wants to explore the heritage cities of the city, which is fine. So I'm going to bold this up. He wants to explore the heritage of the city. The user can go through the app and find an activity called as the Kolkata Grand Tour Heritage City, heritage site. Now, in this case, we are assuming that Mr. Akash already knows what tour he wants to take, right? Maybe he explored the app earlier or whatever, right? Clicking on the activity card, obviously this shouldn't be called activity anymore, will open up the activity details page, and basically it would be the tour details page, which contains details about the tour like the description, duration, distance covered, roadmap, what to expect, ratings, etc. The experience the experience till now can be compared to booking an Airbnb. Okay, fine. After purchasing the activity, the users can access the tour. Now, reading all of this makes me feel like, isn't this very similar to any app like Headout, like Airbnb experiences, like booking.com, where you can go ahead and book tours, right? And I'm sure that every city or every country has its own app where people can book guided tours. So my question is, are you making an app to book guided tours? Is that what this is, right? You're just creating another app to book guided tours. Anyway, but let's continue. The tour screen will have a map, which is pretty obvious. I could do this with Google Maps as well, with an option to switch to AR, which will guide the users to different heritage sites. and I don't understand how the AR system works over here, right? I don't know what I'm going to see in the AR, because the location, the distance, the time, all of that I can see with Google Maps, right? That's fine. This will be accompanied with a voiceover guiding and giving necessary information to the user throughout the tour. Users will have the ability to change the voice language and choose their preferred playback speed. Now, this thing is the only thing that made sense to me until now. Right? Now, it's still very unclear, and he hasn't documented this correctly, where he's mentioning why the solution exists and who is it solving for. Now, let's go back over here, right? So here it says, to learn about unpopular places yet. You're not solving the problem for Mr. Rahul, right? That solution is not for Mr. Rahul. And that solution over here, when Akash says takes guided tours everywhere. First of all, this is not even a user story, right? So I'm going to ignore that. Have a tour guide who speaks in native language. So this concept of having of having to change the language and playback speed is only solving this part where Mr. Akash is unable to speak in his native language and so does not want to miss out on anything the tour guide says. So maybe he doesn't understand the language. It's not about speaking in this case. It's about understanding the language. So this is again incorrect when you say speaks. But again, my question here is, are you going to go ahead and create this feature only for this one tiny use case, which is like 1% of the travelers? Like pretty much only 1% of the people are going to have this problem, right? Are you going to create an app just for 1% of the people? Absolutely not, right? So like I said, even though this solution makes sense, you're solving it for the wrong people, right? And coming back over here to the list of problems, right? Designing a solution for different problems. This is the mistake, because if I were to come over here and look at this, accompanying by a voiceover, all right, giving instruction throughout the tour, the main problem that this will solve is, if I come over here, is enabling people to take tours at their own convenience. This is the biggest use case to have this entire app itself. And having it on your own convenience, taking the time you need, is not covered in either of these two versions, right? That is the biggest problem. So you can see I'm trying to connect every single thing. And after all of this is the first thing that made sense. Now, let's talk about Mr. Rahul, which is this one, right? So users like Mr. Rahul, who prefer to explore and discover new places, also benefit from the activities, as they can avail good things about a guided tour without being restricted away. Now, I feel like this is deviating from who Mr. Rahul is. Okay. Now it feels like this person is not Mr. Rahul anymore, right? This will also solve the problem of not being able to find unpopular but great places, as they will already be a part of the tour, such as suggestions. Now, this feels like Google Maps to me, right? So I don't feel like this is a problem or a use case altogether. Then they will also be able to find free roam feature, which again is Google Maps to me. So I'm not going to do this. And again, time travel here as well, right? So now the only thing that made sense to me was for Mr. Akash, right, wants to listen in the language of their choice, right? And also somebody who wants to do it at their own convenience, right? Now, then he came up with version 3. Okay, let's look at this. Now, as you can see, he's now brought it down to only one persona, because like I said, you're solving for only one small use case, right? Or in this case, we can say 2 use cases, all right? And we can see that over here. Mr. Akash, again, mid-20s, all of that. Mr. Akash does not want to get rushed by the tour guide, as he wants to take his sweet time to explore every place. Now, although this is correct, this is not framed in the right way. Because when you say wants to not get rushed, you're just playing around with English words. You're not framing the user's story correctly. Even though grammatically this is correct, but this is not the right way to say, right? So the ideal way to be is Mr. Akash wants to take his own sweet time to explore and not be rushed by a tour guide. And Mr. Akash wants to find a way to cope up with the tour guide's foreign accent so that he can enjoy the experience without missing out on anything. Right? So here there's a small problem of language and understanding, and here it is taking the own sweet time. This user story is the only reason this app will exist, right? Now, if the person who made this problem statement and the solution started off right from here, the whole thing would have been a disaster, right? Because there were so many mistakes and so many gaps. Now let's try to understand the current behaviors of this, right? So unable to find a way to cope up with the tour guide's foreign accent. Now this again is a very small percentage, right? This is a very small use case, right? But it is still a use case and we can leave that. The major thing is not being rushed by the tour guide as they want to take their own sweet time, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and I'm going to say possible solutions. Number one is go to Google and read on your own. Okay. Second one is ask tour guides. Ask locals, not tour guides. Right. Now, the thing here is that even though these are possible solutions, the person here, Mr. Akash, wants to take a guided tour. That's what he wants to do, right? He wants somebody to guide, right? Which means Google is not going to offer this and the local is also not going to offer this. Which means now there is a valid reason for this app to exist. And this is going to be the USP of the app. Because we are not able to solve the problem with the current solutions, or maybe I would say current behaviors, or current solutions is fine, right? And Mr. Akash wants a guided tour. Mr. Akash wants somebody to tell him all of this, and there is no way to get it done. That is the reason we can create this app. Okay. Now, he's gone ahead and create the solution in a lot more detail, and let's figure this out. To create an app provides audio guided tours, right? Now, this is audio guided tours, which is very important. This is the USP to solo travelers. Unlike Mr. Akash, who can browse to the app and select the preferred virtually guided tour. Now, again, it shouldn't be virtually over here because you're obviously going to be doing this on the spot, in front of the place. And now he's explaining how this works. So let's say someone visited Kolkata and wants to explore the heritage sites of the city. The user can go to the app, find a tour, whatever, and clicking on the tour. So basically all of this is purchasing and getting access, which is fine. Right, this is pretty obvious. The tour screen will have a map with an option to switch to AR. Right now, I gave him feedback and I said that make AR the core experience itself. Right, or else this is just Google Maps again. Right, make AR the core experience, with which will guide the user to different checkpoints. Valid. This will be accompanied by a voiceover guiding and providing necessary information throughout the tour. Right, so this is basically how the app works. The app will then determine the location of the user through the GPS and only start playing audio when the user is passing the checkpoint, right? Now, this is how this works. Now, the interesting thing here is that this will work only if there is an internet connection, right? But what if there is no internet connection? That's an edge case that he will have to consider. The audio playback can be paused and also scrubbed, which is totally fine. And users can go back and listen to the previous checkpoints audio if they've missed anything or they don't remember something. Okay, users will also have the ability to toggle the transcript on and off, change the accent, right, and choose the preferred playback speed. Right, the audio play will be similar to a Spotify player. Now he is giving an idea of how this works. Now this is the happy path, but he also has to consider things like when there is no internet connection, right? When there is low battery, right? If the phone does not, is not able to show the AR experience effectively, right? So these are edge cases that he has to solve for. Now, the tour will not include any restrooms or restrooms. So these items will be pinned to the map as a suggestion. There will also be an emergency button, which is fine. So this is like an additional thing. Now, coming to the AR mode, right? Now, I think both of these are the exact same things, but we'll just quickly read this. Users can choose to switch to the AR mode if they want an immersive experience, right? For example, while passing an important building, the users will be presented with a card explaining the brief history of the building, or when passing through a restaurant, they can see the cuisines offered and stuff like that, right? Now, these are details that you can solidify a little bit more. And he also said that in the map mode, this would not be possible. And it would just, you just receive a notification saying that restaurant nearby. Now, I don't know how this app will look like. I don't know how the UI or the wireframe is. So that's totally okay. Now here is doing something else. I feel that we can push users use the AR mode and come up with this thing called collectibles on the route. For example, in the tour details page, the user can explore yourself section, which will have like 7 bonus places to explore. Now, this is some sort of a gamification thing, which I don't really think is necessary or important, but it is like a good to have feature. But again, is it really needed is something we can discuss later. But the most important thing is being solved over here. Then you have this extra feature of time travel, right? Now he's also mentioned the happy path and the edge case. So the edge case is the audio can be paused, scrubbed, and even can be changed. Now this is not an edge case. This is how the current behavior is. This is not an edge case. These features will be useful to users who, but a problem will arise if they want to set the playback. Like again, this is not an edge case. Like the edge case in this case would be if there is no internet connection, when there is low battery, or if the GPS is not working, right? These are the only edge cases. Now here is another example of a valid edge case, which is the audio of checkpoint A is still playing, even though they have reached checkpoint B. And he's given some sort of a solution over here, which is fine, where he says that the app should not just stop at checkpoint A, right? Even though you're in checkpoint B, whatever it is, right? So he's come up with a solution. I'm not going to get into it, all that. But anyway, the whole point of this is it's very important to really connect every single piece together so that it makes very much sense, right? So that's how you go ahead and validate a problem statement. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. I'll see you guys in the next video. So then take care and bye-bye.